I stood at the altar, hands trembling as I clutched my bouquet of white roses. The church was packed with everyone I loved, family, friends, colleagues, all dressed in their finest, smiling at me with joy and anticipation. Mark stood across from me in his navy suit, looking more handsome than I'd ever seen him, his eyes warm and steady on mine. The officiant had just begun reading our vows when movement caught my eye. Someone was standing, my best friend. Tina rose from her seat in the third row, her face flue's head and determined. "Stop," she shouted, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You can't marry him, he doesn't know who you really are." The church erupted in gasps. Conversations broke out in frantic whispers. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Mark's eyes went dark with confusion, then something else. Doubt, maybe even hurt. My chest tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. The bouquet slipped from my trembling fingers, white petals scattering across the polished floor. The woman I'd trusted with every secret, every fear, every dream, the person who'd been my other half for 10 years, had just humiliated me in front of everyone I loved. The music stopped. The officiant fumbled with his notes. And the silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Mark didn't say a word. He just turned and walked straight down the aisle, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. I tried to call after him, tried to make my voice work, but nothing came out. I stood frozen in my wedding dress, watching him disappear through the heavy wooden doors. Tina brushed past me, rushing after him with exaggerated concern. "Mark, wait," she called, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I caught a glimpse of her whispering something urgently to him in the vestibule, her hand on his arm, her face close to his. Whatever she said, Mark's expression hardened further. Then they were both gone, him to his car, her pretending to chase him down. The guests sat in stunned, uncomfortable silence. Some looked at me with pity. Others exchanged knowing glances, as if this confirmed suspicions they'd secretly harbored. My bridesmaids surrounded me, asking if I was okay, but their voices sounded distant and tinny, like I was underwater. My mother tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should take a moment," he suggested weakly. But there was no moment to take. My wedding was over before it had even begun. I felt like a ghost haunting my own ceremony. That night, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, still wearing my wedding dress. The intricate lace felt suffocating now, a costume for a performance that had been cancelled mid-show. My makeup was smeared down my face in dark streaks, mascara mixing with tears I couldn't seem to stop. My phone lay on the nightstand, screen dark except for one unread message. I'd been staring at it for an hour, unable to bring myself to open it. Finally, with shaking hands, I picked up the phone. The message was from Tina. I did what I had to. "You'll understand eventually." My voice cracked in the darkness of the room. "My name is Vanessa Cole," I whispered to no one, "and my best friend just destroyed my wedding." I tried calling Mark 17 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. I sent texts that went unread. His parents weren't answering either. It was like he'd vanished completely, taking any chance at explanation with him. I pulled off my veil and threw it across the room. The delicate fabric caught on my dresser, hanging there like a ghost. Outside my window, I could hear my relatives leaving, car doors slamming, engines starting, taking the remnants of what should have been the happiest day of my life away with them. I was alone with my humiliation and confusion, with no idea what I'd supposedly done wrong or why my best friend had betrayed me so publicly and so completely. I couldn't sleep, so I let my mind drift back to the beginning, back to when Tina and I first met. We were college roommates, randomly paired by the housing office, and we'd clicked immediately. She was loud where I was quiet, bold where I was cautious, the perfect complement to my careful personality. We stayed up late talking about our dreams, our fears, our terrible taste in men. We made promises over cheap wine and pizza. We'd never let guys come between us, never abandon each other for anyone, always be each other's person. When I'd gotten my heart broken by a musician who turned out to be seeing 3 other girls, Tina had stayed up with me for 3 straight nights, bringing me ice cream and tissues. When she'd failed a major exam and thought she'd lost her scholarship, I'd helped her study for the retake until she passed with flying colors. We celebrated her promotions at work like they were my own. We cried together through breakups, cheered each other through successes. She was my sister in everything but blood. Or so I'd thought. Now, sitting in my ruined wedding dress, I tried to remember if there had been warning signs I'd missed. Had she always been capable of this kind of betrayal? Or had something changed along the way, some shift I'd been too blind to see? The memory of how I met Mark played in my mind like an old movie. It was 3 years ago at a dinner party hosted by mutual friends. I hadn't wanted to go, I was exhausted from a long week at work, but Tina had insisted. "Come on, V," she'd said, using the nickname only she was allowed to use. "You need to get out more. All work and no play makes you boring." So I'd gone, wearing a simple black dress and minimal makeup. Mark was sitting at the other end of the table. And when our eyes met during introductions, something electric passed between us. He was funny without trying too hard, intelligent without being pretentious, kind in a way that seemed genuine rather than performative. After dinner, we'd talked for hours about everything and nothing, books we'd read, places we wanted to travel, our theories about whether dogs dream. Tina had seemed thrilled about our connection. Finally, she'd exclaimed when Mark asked for my number at the end of the night. "Someone who can actually keep up with you intellectually. He's perfect for you, V." She'd hugged me enthusiastically, spinning me around in the parking lot like we were teenagers. I'd never noticed the fleeting look that crossed her face when Mark smiled back at me that night, a darkness that disappeared so quickly I would have thought I'd imagined it if I'd seen it at all. For the first year of my relationship with Mark, everything seemed perfect. Tina was supportive, always asking about him, encouraging me to take things seriously. But sometime during the second year, small comments started creeping in. "He seems too good to be true, doesn't he?" she'd say casually over coffee. Or, "Doesn't it bother you that he's still friends with his ex-girlfriend?" At first, the comments seemed harmless, maybe even protective, the kind of thing a concerned friend might say. But there was something in her tone that made me uneasy, a sharpness hidden beneath the concern. When Mark proposed 6 months ago, Tina was one of the first people I told. She'd hugged me and said all the right things, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm so happy for you," she'd said, but the words felt rehearsed, like lines from a script she didn't quite believe. During wedding planning, she became my maid of honor by default. We'd always promised each other that role. But she questioned every decision I made. The venue was too expensive. The dress made me look washed out. The guest list was too long. I'd chalked it up to stress or maybe her own relationship issues. Her boyfriend had just broken up with her, and I figured she was projecting her pain onto my happiness. I never considered that her criticisms might be deliberate sabotage, that she was trying to plant doubts I was too in love to notice. The night before the wedding, Tina and I had shared a quiet drink in my hotel room. The bridesmaids had gone home hours earlier, but she'd stayed behind. We sat on the edge of my bed, sipping champagne from plastic cups, surrounded by garment bags and wedding paraphernalia. She'd been jittery all evening, fidgeting with her phone, unable to sit still. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying earlier but didn't want to admit it. "Are you okay?" I'd asked, concerned. She'd looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she'd pulled me into a hug that lasted too long, her grip almost desperate. "Promise me you'll be happy," she'd whispered against my shoulder. "You deserve it, V. You deserve everything." Her voice had cracked on the last word. I'd thought it was sweet, emotional in the way weddings make everyone emotional. I'd hugged her back, telling her I loved her, thanking her for being my constant through everything. "I couldn't have gotten through life without you," I'd told her. She'd pooed back, looking at me with glistening eyes. "I know," she'd said quietly. Then she'd left, claiming she needed to get some rest before the big day. I didn't realize I was watching her say goodbye, not to the night, but to our entire friendship. I didn't know that in less than 12 hours, she would stand up in that church and destroy everything. The days after the ruined wedding were a blur of humiliation and isolation. I became the town's whispered story, the girl whose wedding had imploded in the most dramatic way possible. People I'd known for years crossed the street to avoid me. Invitations to social gatherings mysteriously stopped. Even my coworkers treated me differently, offering pitying smiles and avoiding eye contact. Mark wouldn't answer my calls. Every message I sent disappeared into a void of silence. His best man finally responded to my desperate texts with a brief, cold message: he needs space. Don't contact him again. Tina had vanished completely. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her social media accounts were deactivated. When I went to her apartment, her roommate told me she'd left town for a while, didn't know when she'd be back. The betrayal was complete and suffocating. I'd lost not just my wedding day, but my fiancé, my best friend, and apparently my entire social circle in one catastrophic moment. My mother tried to comfort me, but even she seemed confused and hurt. What did Tina mean? She kept asking. What don't we know about you? I had no answers. I replayed every moment of my relationship with Mark, every conversation, every decision, looking for whatever secret Tina thought justified her public betrayal. I found nothing, just a normal relationship between two people who loved each other, or at least I thought we did. 2 weeks after the disaster, Mark finally agreed to meet me. He suggested a coffee shop across town, somewhere we'd never been together, neutral territory. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting in a corner booth looking exhausted. Dark circles shot out his eyes. His usually neat hair was disheveled. He looked like he'd aged years in just 14 days. Thank you for coming, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. He nodded dead but didn't meet my eyes. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The coffee shop buzzed with normal life around us, students studying, couples laughing, people living ordinary days while mine had shattered. I need to understand what happened, I said finally. Please, Mark, just tell me what she said. He took a deep breath, his jaw working like he was grinding his teeth. She called me the night before the wedding, he began, his voice rough. Around midnight. She was crying, said she had to tell me so mething before I made the biggest mistake of my life. My chest tightened. What did she tell you? His eyes finally met mine, and I saw pain there, and worse, doubt. She said you'd dated my brother. Years ago, before we met. That you'd never told me, that you'd lied about it for our entire relationship. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the color drain from my face as memory rushed back, a memory I'd buried so deep I'd almost forgotten it existed. Years ago, long before I met Mark, I'd briefly dated someone named Kyle. We'd met at a music festival, spent a few casual months together, then drifted apart when he moved for work. It had been nothing serious, just a brief connection that ended naturally. I'd never known Kyle's last name until months after we'd broken up, when I'd seen him tagged in a mutual friend's photo. By then, the relationship was ancient history, barely worth remembering. When I met Mark and he mentioned his late brother's name had been Kyle, I'd felt a moment of odd coincidence but hadn't connected the dots. Kyle was a common name. His brother had died in a car accident 2 years before we met, and Mark rarely talked about him. It was a painful subject I'd learned to navigate carefully. By the time I realized the Kyle I'd briefly dated might have been Mark's brother, we were already deeply in love. The connection seemed so irrelevant, so distant from our present, that bringing it up felt unnecessary, like mentioning I'd once sat next to someone's cousin on a bus. It wasn't a secret, I said desperately. I didn't even realize he was your brother until months after we got together, and by then it seemed pointless to mention a relationship that had meant nothing and ended years before. Mark's expression remained closed, unreadable. Tina had proof, he said quietly. She showed me a photo of you and Kyle together at that festival. You looked happy, close. My mind reeled. That photo. I'd kept it in a private box of old memories in my closet, random concert tickets, college photos, sentimental nonsense I'd never looked at but couldn't bring myself to throw away. The box contained fragments of my life before Mark, stuff that had no bearing on who I'd become. Only one person had ever seen inside that box. 3 months ago, when Tina had helped me organize my apartment before the wedding, she'd found it while we were cleaning my closet. I'd laughed, showing her the ridiculous photos and mementos, including that picture of me and Kyle at the FE's Tyval. Look how young I was, I'd said, barely recognizing the girl in the photo. I hadn't mentioned Kyle was Mark's brother because I honestly hadn't made the connection in that moment. It was just an old photo of an old boyfriend, meaningless. But Tina must have remembered. Or maybe she'd already known. Maybe she'd been digging through my past, looking for ammunition. The realization hit me like ice water. She'd gone through my private things, found that photo, and weaponized it against me. She'd used my own forgotten past to destroy my future. She went through my personal belongings, I whispered, my voice breaking. She betrayed my privacy to ruin us. Mark's hands wrapped around his coffee cup, knuckles white with tension. She told me you'd kept it a secret on purpose, he continued, pain etched in every word. That you'd manipulated me, knowing about Kyle the whole time. She made it sound like you'd sought me out. Deliberately, like our entire relationship was built on lies. I felt sick. The twisted narrative Tina had created was so far from reality it was almost laughable. Except Mark clearly believed it, or at least had believed it enough to walk away from our wedding. Why didn't you confront me? I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. If you had doubts, why didn't you just ask me? His jaw clenched. The timing felt too perfect. The photo, the wedding day, everything. I panicked. I thought if I confronted you at the altar, you'd lie to save face in front of everyone. I thought maybe Tina was giving me an out before I made a permanent mistake. He looked up at me, guilt flooding his features. I was scared, Vanessa. Scared that everything we built was based on something false. So I just left. I ran instead of staying to hear your side. The confession hung between us, heavy with regret. You trusted her word over 3 years with me. I said quietly. You believed her manipulation over our entire relationship. He flinched. I know, and I hate myself for it. But in that moment, with the wedding starting, with her crying and showing me proof, I just broke. We sat in silence. Outside, rain began pattering against the windows, matching the tears sliding down my cheeks. After our coffee shop meeting, I tried reaching Tina again. I needed answers. I needed to understand why she'd done this, what I'd done to deserve such calculated destruction. Every call went to voicemail. Every text remained undelivered. She'd blocked me everywhere, phone, social media, email. I was completely cut off from someone who'd been in my life every single day for a decade. Through mutual friends, I heard whispers. Tina was going through something difficult. She'd done what she thought was right. People painted her as a troubled friend making a misguided attempt to protect Mark from something she believed was deception. The gaslighting cut deeper than the original betrayal. She wasn't just absent, she was controlling the narrative from her hiding place, making herself the concerned friend and me the liar. I wanted to scream at everyone that she'd gone through my private belongings, weaponized my past, and destroyed my wedding based on a relationship that had ended years before Mark and I even met. But defending myself felt pointless. People had already chosen sides. My former friend had poisoned every well, leaving me isolated in my own life. At night, I lay awake replaying our entire friendship, looking for clues I'd missed. When had her feelings changed? Had she always been capable of this cruelty? Or had something specific triggered this complete betrayal of everything we'd meant to each other? A week after meeting Mark at the coffee shop, I found something in my mailbox that made my blood run cold. It was a handwritten letter, no return address, but I recognized Tina's elegant script immediately. My hands shook as I opened it. The words were carefully chosen, each sentence a tiny knife designed to cut precisely where it would hurt most. Vanessa, it began, you and I both know you were never meant for him. You've always taken what you wanted without considering anyone else. You stole my chance at happiness, and I couldn't let you do it again. You think you're so perfect, so deserving of everything you get. But you're not. You never were. You're just good at making people believe you are. I did what was necessary to protect someone I care about from your selfishness. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to lose something you thought was yours. Consider us even. Don't try to contact me again. There's nothing left between us worth saving. The letter wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I read it 3 times, trying to decode the meaning behind the venom. Stole my chance. Consider us even. Even for what? What had I supposedly taken from her that warranted this level of destruction? I racked my brain for any moment where I might have unknowingly hurt her, any relationship or opportunity I'd interfered with. I came up empty, except for one possibility that kept nagging at the back of my mind. A possibility too awful to fully consider. 2 days after the letter arrived, Mark called me. His voice was tight with an emotion I couldn't identify. Vanessa, I need to show you something. Can you come to my apartment? 20 minutes later, I sat on his couch while he pulled up his phone. His hands were shaking slightly as he opened his messages. After the wedding fell apart, Tina kept texting me, he said quietly. At first it was just concerned friend stuff, asking if I was okay, saying she was sorry things happened that way. But then, he showed me the screen. Messages from Tina, dozens of them, increasing in frequency and intensity over the past 2 weeks. They started sympathetic but quickly became something else entirely. I've been in love with you for years, one read. Since before Vanessa came into the picture. I watched you fall for her and it killed me, but I kept quiet because I thought she'd make you happy. Then I found that photo and realized she'd been lying to you from the start. I couldn't let her trap you in a marriage built on deception. My stomach dropped. She's in love with you? Mark nodded grimly. Apparently. She confessed everything once she thought the wedding was permanently off. Said she'd been waiting for the right moment to tell me how she felt, but you got there first. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Every strange comment Tina had made. About Mark being too good to be true. Every criticism of my relationship. Every attempt to plant seeds of doubt. It had never been concern for my well-being. It had been jealousy wrapped in friendship's clothing. She'd introduced us at that dinner party 3 years ago, probably hoping nothing would come of it. When Mark and I connected, she'd hidden her feelings behind supportive friendship, waiting for our relation's hip to fail naturally. When it didn't, when we got engaged instead, she'd taken matters into her own hands. The wedding interruption hadn't been about protecting Mark from deception. It had been about destroying the relationship that stood between her and what she wanted. I felt betrayed on a level one hadn't known was possible. Our entire friendship, 10 years of trust, support, and shared history, had been conditional. Conditional on me never having something she wanted. Conditional on me staying in my assigned role in her life, never overshadowing her or threatening her desires. I'm so sorry, Mark said, his voice breaking. I should have trusted you. I should have asked you directly instead of believing her manipulation. I let her use my grief about Kyle against us. I looked at him, at this man I'd planned to marry, and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness yet, but understanding. Tina had played us both expertly, using our vulnerabilities against us. The question was, what did we do now? Over the next few months, I focused on rebuilding my life piece by piece. I stopped trying to convince people of my innocence and instead let my actions speak for themselves. I threw myself into my work, earning a promotion I'd been chasing for a year. I connected with friends. Tina had slowly isolated me from, apologizing for my absence and explaining, briefly, what had happened. Most were sympathetic. Some had noticed Tina's possessive tendencies but hadn't known how to mention it without seeming jealous or paranoid. She always had this way of making herself the center of attention, one friend admitted over lunch. If you were happy about something, she'd somehow turn the conversation back to her struggles. Small cracks began appearing in Tina's careful constructed facade. Through the grapevine, I heard about problems at her workplace. A major project had failed spectacularly after she'd allegedly sabotaged a colleague's contribution to make herself look better. Her boss was investigating, and her job was on thin ice. I didn't take satisfaction in her professional troubles, but I couldn't help feeling that karma was slowly, quietly doing its work. Mark and I remained in contact, carefully rebuilding trust that had been shattered. We didn't jump back into the relationship, there was too much damage to repair quickly. But we talked, long conversations about everything we'd been through, everything we'd misunderstood. It was slow, painful work. But it felt honest in a way nothing had felt honest in months. 6 months after the ruined wedding, I received an unexpected piece of mail. It was an elegant invitation to a charity gala hosted by Tina's company. The event was black tie, high profile, featuring local business leaders and philanthropists. My first instinct was to throw it away. Why would I want to go anywhere Tina might be? But something made me pause. A small, determined voice in my head whispered, "Go. Show them you're not broken. Show her you survived." I bought a new dress, deep emerald green, elegant but confident. I got my hair professionally styled. I practiced my smile in the mirror until it looked natural rather than forced. When the night of the gala arrived, I walked into that venue with my head high and my shoulders back. The same people who'd pitted me months ago now whispered in admiration. I could feel their eyes tracking my movement across the room, their surprise that I wasn't the broken, humiliated woman they'd expected. I was halfway through my first glass of champagne when I saw her. Tina stood near the bar, looking polished and professional in a black cocktail dress. When our eyes met across the room, she froze. Her carefully composed expression cracked for just a moment, revealing shock, fear, and something else I couldn't quite identify. She made her way over slowly, like someone approaching a dangerous animal. "Vanessa," she said, her voice uncertain. "I didn't know you'd be here." I took a slow sip of my champagne, letting her wait in the uncomfortable silence. Around us, the gala continued, classical music playing softly, guests mingling with practiced ease. But in our small bubble, tension crackled like electricity. "Why wouldn't I be here?" I asked calmly. "I was invited." Tina's eyes darted around nervously, checking who might be watching us. "I just meant, after everything. After you destroyed my wedding?" I supplied helpfully. "After you betrayed 10 years of friendship to pursue a man who was never interested in you?" Her face flushed. "That's not fair. You don't understand what it's been like for me." "Then explain it," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm listening." She gestured toward a quieter corner, away from the main crowd. We moved there together, and she turned to face me, her composure cracking further. "You wouldn't understand what it's like," she began, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "To always be second best. To watch you succeed at everything, career, relationships, life, while I struggled. To finally meet someone who made me feel something real, only to watch him choose you instead." The words tumbled out, years of resentment spilling into the space between us. "I introduced you to be 'cause I thought you'd be friends, nothing more. When he fell for you, it felt like theft. Like you'd taken something that should have been mine." I listened in silence, watching her justify the unjustifiable, my calmness seeming to unnerve her more than anger would have. "So you decided to destroy my wedding," I said quietly. "To humiliate me in front of everyone I love. To manipulate Mark with half-truths and stolen photos." Tina's eyes filled with tears. "I thought if he knew about Kyle, he'd realize you weren't the perfect person he believed you were. That maybe he'd see me instead, the friend who'd always been honest with him." "Except you weren't honest," I countered. "You twisted something innocent into something sinister. You went through my private belongings. You crossing-eated a narrative that served your jealousy, not the truth." She opened her mouth to respond, but movement near the entrance caught my attention. Mark had arrived. He stood in the doorway scanning the crowd, looking uncomfortable in his formal suit. When his eyes found mine, he smiled, a small, genuine smile that made something in my chest loosen. Then he saw Tina standing beside me, and his expression hardened. He crossed the room deliberately, purposefully. Tina's face went pale. "What is he doing here?" she whispered. "The same thing I am," I replied. "Living his life despite your attempts to destroy it." Mark reached us, nodding politely at Tina before turning his full attention to me. "Ready?" he asked simply. I nodded. Together, we walked toward the stage area where the evening's program was about to begin. Tina followed at a distance, confusion and growing dread visible in her expression. She had no idea what was coming. The charity gala's program began with speeches from various company leaders. Mark had somehow arranged to be one of the speakers, something about his company's partnership with the charity. When he took the microphone, the room settled into polite attention. He spoke eloquently about the charity's mission, about giving back to the community, about the importance of honesty and integrity in both business and personal relationships. Then he paused, his expression growing serious. "Before I finish, I want to share something personal," he said. 6 months ago, someone I trusted tried to destroy my relationship through manipulation and lies. This person took a fragment of truth and weaponized it, using my grief and fear against me. The room went very still. I could see Tina standing frozen near the bar, her face draining of color. "I recently discovered recordings from that time," Mark continued. "Conversations where this person confessed their true motivations. I think it's important for truth to come to light, even when it's uncomfortable." He pulled out his phone, connected it to the sound system. His hands were steady, his voice calm. Then he pressed play. Tina's voice filled the elegant ballroom. Slurred slightly with alcohol but perfectly clear. "I've loved him for years, you know. Years. And she just waltzed in and took him like it was nothing. So I found that photo, and I thought, finally, a way to make him see who she really is. To break them apart before the wedding trapped him forever." The recording continued, revealing more of her drunken confession about manipulating the situation, about hoping Mark would turn to her for comfort once I was out of the picture. Gasps rippled through the room. The recording stopped. Silence crashed down like a wave. Everyone turned to look at Tina, whose carefully constructed facade crumbled in real time. Her boss, standing near the front of the room, stared at her with a mixture of shock and anger. Her colleagues whispered urgently to each other, pieces clicking into place. The promotion she'd lost. The projects that had mysteriously failed. The pattern of sabotage that suddenly made perfect sense. Tina tried to spin it, stepping forward with her hands raised. "That was taken out of context," she stammered. "I was drunk, upset, not thinking clearly. You can't judge me based on one moment of weakness." But no one was buying it. The evidence of her manipulation, her calculated destruction of others for personal gain, was too clear. People began moving away from her, literally and figuratively. Her boss approached her with a tight expression, speaking in low, clipped tones. I watched her professional reputation implode in real time, watched years of carefully crafted networking dissolve like smoke. Part of me felt pity. This was a comprehensive destruction. But another part, the part that had sat in a ruined wedding dress crying alone, felt a cold sense of justice. She'd tried to destroy me completely, publicly, without mercy. Now she was experiencing the same exposure, the same helpless watching as everything fell apart. Mark returned to my side as the crowd buzzed with gossip and speculation. "Was that too much?" he asked quietly, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. I thought about it. About forgiveness and revenge, about justice and vindictiveness. "It was the truth," I said finally. "That's all it was." The gala ended early after that, the festive atmosphere completely destroyed by the dramatic revelation. As guests filed out, many approached me with apologies, for judging me, for believing rumors, for not defending me when it mattered. I accepted their words gracefully, but I didn't need them. Their validation wasn't why I'd come. Tina remained near the bar, isolated in a room that had emptied around her. As I gathered my coat to leave, I found myself walking toward her one last time. She looked up as I approached, her eyes red and makeup smeared. For a moment, we just stood there, two women who'd once been inseparable, now strangers shaped by betrayal. "You spent years trying to destroy me," I said quietly, "because he didn't love you. But you should have asked yourself why." She flinched. "What do you mean? Why didn't he love you, Tina? You're smart, attractive, successful in your own right. But instead of building your own happiness, you decided to steal mine. Instead of being someone worth loving, you became someone willing to destroy others." She opened her mouth, closed it. No words came. "You could have been happy," I continued. "But you chose bitterness instead. You chose to tear down rather than build up. That's why he didn't choose you, not because I stole anything, but because you showed him who you really were." I turned to leave, then paused. I hope someday you figure out how to be happy without destroying everyone else's happiness first. Then I walked away, leaving her standing alone in the emptying ballroom, finally facing the consequences of her choices. Mark walked me to my car that night. The air was cool and clean after the tension inside. For a long moment we stood in the parking lot, neither of us quite ready to leave. "Vanessa," he said, finally, his voice rough with emotion. "I need to apologize. I apologize, not just for believing Tina initially, but for everything. For not trusting you. For running instead of staying to hear your explanation. For letting my fear override 3 years of knowing who you are." Tears welled in his eyes. "You deserved better from me. You deserved someone who trusted you enough to ask questions instead of just believing the worst. I failed you when you needed me most, and I'm so sorry." I looked at him, this man I'd almost married, whose moment of doubt had shattered everything we'd built. "Could we come back from that? Should we?" "I forgive you," I said softly. "But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened." His face fell. "I know. But is there any chance, any possibility that we could try again? Start over, build something stronger this time?" I thought about it carefully. Thought about trust broken and slowly rebuilt. Thought about the months we'd spent talking, rediscovering each other beyond Tina's manipulation. But I also thought about that moment at the altar when he'd walked away without a word, believing her lies over our years together. "You needed her lies to believe the worst about me," I said gently. "That's not love, Mark. That's fear. And I can't build a marriage on fear." His face crumpled. "So that's it? We're done? We're different now," I replied. "Both of us. Maybe that's not a bad thing, but it's not what we were. And I can't go back to that." A year later, I stood in the same venue where my wedding had been ruined. But this time, I was hosting an event of my own, a support group and networking event for women rebuilding their lives after betrayal. The room was filled with survivors. Women leaving toxic friendships, ending manipulative relationships, starting over after devastating losses. I welcomed them with a smile that was finally, genuinely at peace. "My name is Vanessa," I began, "and a year ago, my best friend tried to destroy my wedding in front of everyone I loved. She weaponized my past, manipulated the man I was going to marry, and tried to steal my future for herself." I paused, looking around at the faces watching me, some sympathetic, others curious, all familiar with their own versions of betrayal. I lost that day. I lost my wedding, my fiancé, my best friend of 10 years, and for a while, I lost myself. I spent months replaying everything, wondering what I'd done wrong, how I could have prevented it. A few women nodded, recognizing that particular spiral of self-blame. But here's what I learned. Sometimes people we trust will betray us. Sometimes they'll do it publicly, spectacularly, in ways designed to humiliate and destroy. And sometimes the only thing we did wrong was trust them in the first place. I gestured to the room around us, to the community we were building. This space exists because I refused to let that betrayal define me. I refused to stay broken. And I discovered that the best response to someone trying to destroy your life isn't revenge, it's rebuilding something better than what you lost. The women applauded softly. After the presentation, several approached me with their own stories, seeking advice or simply connection. I listened to each one, offered what wisdom I could, and marveled at the strength it takes to keep going after betrayal. As the event wound down, I saw a familiar figure standing near the back of the room. Mark. He'd kept his distance over the past year, respecting my decision while occasionally checking in through brief, friendly texts. Tonight, he approached slowly, carefully. "This is incredible, Vanessa," he said, gesturing to the event. "What you've built here." "Thank you," I replied. "It helps to turn pain into purpose." We talked for a few minutes, easier now, without the weight of what we'd lost pressing down on us. He told me about his new job, his therapy, the work he'd done to understand why he'd been so quick to believe the worst. I told him about the support group, my promotion, the life I was building on my own terms. "I'm proud of you," he said finally. "For everything." I smiled. "I'm proud of me too." As he left, I turned back to the room, to the women connecting, sharing stories, finding strength in shared experience. This was my victory, not in destroying Tina or winning Mark back, but in creating something meaningful from the wreckage. I'd lost a friend who was never really a friend. I'd lost a fiancé who hadn't trusted me when it mattered. But I'd gained something far more valuable, myself. Clear-eyed, unshakable, and finally free from relationships that required me to be less than I was. The venue's manager dimmed the lights, signaling the end of our rental time. As I gathered my things, I took one last look around the space that held such painful memories. They didn't hurt anymore. They were just part of my story, the difficult chapter that led to something better. I walked out into the cool evening air, feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, the Paw Street faded into shadow. Ahead, illuminated by streetlights and possibility, lay a future I'd built entirely on my own terms. And that, I realized with quiet satisfaction, was the best revenge of all.